Hello, and welcome to Commissioner Carr. Today is February 28th. December 28th. Time is a circle. I'm coming to you for the last time this year in my Commissioner in the Car. Although I will have a Zoom with Zarni later this week, right on New Year's Eve. That'll be airing. But today is my last Commissioner of Car for 2021. And I just wanted to, talk about a little reflection on what's happened this year at the Board of Elections in Onondaga County and in elections in New York. But before I get to that, right off the top, I want to do a reminder. Tomorrow is the last time for you to go to a hearing on redistricting for Onondaga County. The county exec is having his hearing at 11:30 a.m. And then he will probably approve the county Republican plan. Now, many may say, well, why go? When you went last time and showed up in force, the county exec did veto it. Although I doubt he will veto it this time, although there's always hope. And I always believe that we should stand up and put our grievances to our government entities, if we have them, and stand up and tell them why we believe that these maps are wrong, if we do, or if you believe they're right, why you believe these maps are right. So that is happening 11:30 a.m. at the Civic Center, so that's tomorrow. And then if he signs them as is believed, we'll have to see where that goes. There's several different groups that have talked about possibly taking legal action on these maps, so it will not be over. Remember, the maps that are put in question are not going to be in effect until 2023, so there's plenty of time for legal and court action on this, and I imagine that that's what we'll see if these maps are put forward in the current configuration. As you know, I have many grievances with this process and with the maps that were chosen. The cracking of the only black majority district inside the city of Syracuse, and also the dividing communities of interest and and the drawing maps that are not as compact as practicable, I believe is a violation of New York state law. And we'll have to see what the courts believe on this if it goes to that. So that is what's happening on redistricting, and that is the last word on redistricting until it gets into the court system, if the county exec signs the maps as he has said he's going to do after this hearing tomorrow. Many people wonder why he's having the hearing at all. He has to by law. It is not something that he's doing magnanimously, that he's trying to hear what the public says. This is a local law, redistricting, and with local laws you have to have a public hearing. Most of the time, those public hearings happen without any fanfare, but because redistricting is such a hot button issue, and there's other groups out there promoting these hearings, that is why you're seeing so many people in attendance, and overwhelmingly attending that say that they do not support the maps in their current configuration, nor the process that has happened so far. But what I wanted today's Commissioner in a Car to focus on is kind of a reflection, my reflection on 2021, and many of the accomplishments we had at the Board of Elections, as well as some of the difficulties. I'll try to go through this month by month, but I don't have anything really prepared. But I wanted to kind of jot down, denote that while 2021 was not the turnout year that 2020 was, in many ways 2021 was just as difficult for boards of elections throughout New York State, because we saw different changing rules regarding COVID, regarding election law, regarding all the various different things that were thrown at us this year in a way that was problematic, and also I also think very rewarding for us as well. I think many of the boards of elections, almost all of the board of elections, rose to the challenge without any major issues this year. I'm really proud of my colleagues that I work with throughout the state, because this has been a very hard 3 years. 2019 with all these reforms, and then the pandemic of 2020 and 2021 has made election administration in a very heated political time very hard to do. And I do believe that everybody who is serving for a good reason and have tried to rise to the challenge, and most I believe have done that. The Onondaga County Board of Elections had our share of challenges this year, and it started in January. Right away, while there was a new administration in town, we were still, if you remember back a year ago, we were still very much in limbo when it came to vaccines. They were just starting to be rolled out. However, we were still looking at a petition season that was supposed to start at the end of February, and we weren't really sure what was going to happen there when it came to petitioning and doing elections in the middle of a pandemic, even though a vaccine was being rolled out. Personally, I found out in January of this year that the salary kerfuffle that happened at the end of 2020 resulted actually in an unexpected windfall for me, because what happened is that even though the salary cut was reversed by the Onondaga County executive vetoing the action of the legislature still decided to reclassify both Commissioner Sardo and myself, and made us so we don't have vacation time or sick time or anything like that, and we were treated more like public officials, and thus wouldn't get an annual increase in our salaries, like any other management confidential that works for the city, or any other public official, by the way, or the county, or any other public official that works for the county. We were the only ones who now don't get an annual raise. However, what they didn't think of when they did that was that we had built up already earned salary, earned vacation and sick time, and thus the county had to pay that out. So it actually resulted in a $15,000 bonus, I guess. It's not really a bonus, we earned that money, but $15,000 payout to both Commissioner Sardo and myself each, because of that move by the county legislature the year before. So that happened in January. In February, the legislature was starting to pass some. One of the big laws that they passed with the legislature was the hand recount law, that now required a hand recount for any race that was close, less than 0.5%, and that went into effect for the June elections. So that's some of the major legislation that was passed this year. Also passed this year was an extension of the COVID pandemic excuse for absentees. Other major legislation was the constitutional amendments for same-day registration and no-fault absentee. Although we know that those did not pass. We'll get to that when we get to November. But those were some of the major pieces of legislation that were passed this year that affected election administration, and the biggest one was the closed contest one that was actually passed the year before, but it went into effect this year. So that is something that changed the way we did election administration. In March, we did start our petitioning, and that was even though vaccines were starting to roll out. I actually had my second dose on March 25th. So I was vaccinated during that time period, but we did have reduced petitions this year in response to the pandemic. But petitions were about the same time as they're normally going to be. Although I say normally, it's changed each of the last 3 years because of the pandemic and because of the changing of the political calendar. So it'll be interesting to see what we do this upcoming year with petitioning. But that happened in March and April. In May, school districts went back to their regular elections. You may remember in 2020, school districts did all of their elections by mail, which resulted in a huge turnout in elections in school districts, which isn't something that normally happens. But they went back to their May regular elections, and we saw them go back to in-person elections. We actually kind of started to see the world opening up a little bit in May. And in June, for the June primary, the Governor Cuomo dropped his mask mandate for New York. This was in response to the CDC guidance that said that if you were vaccinated, you no longer had to wear a mask in public. And as we were going through the June primary, this was actually a little bit problematic because in the middle of early voting is when this changed. And so we had changing guidance on masks inside polling places. We were not allowed to ask for vaccine cards or anything like that to prove why they didn't have a mask. Yet the mask mandate was relaxed, and we did have some inspectors that were uncomfortable, even at that point, being in a polling place without a masking mandate. We lost some. We were scrambling throughout the June primary to make sure that we were fully staffed. But mostly it was the changing messaging and not having the backing of the state to enforce a masking guidance for the June primary. That being said, the June primary went off pretty well. Some of the things that we did at the Onondaga County Board of Elections is almost every polling place inside the city of Syracuse on election day had a on-demand ballot printer for the primary. This reduced a lot of our ballot costs. It also made sure that people got the right ballots. We did not have the stories of inspectors handing out the wrong ballots, because the on-demand ballot printers made sure that they were handing out the right ballots. It was a good test run for the general election, and we did, we had a very successful June primary, even though it was one of the lower turnout primaries, especially for mayor, that we've seen in in our history here in Syracuse, New York. But rolling out those on-demand printers in June for that June primary was something that I was very proud of. We have 40 of them, so we had about I think we had 65 polling places open for the June primary, since it wasn't a full county primary, and so 2/3 of our polling places had these on-demand ballot printers, and they worked extremely well. In July was our first time where I believe we had downtime for at least 2.5 years, because in 2019 there were so many changes to election law. We really didn't take a lot of time off at the Board of Elections. And then, of course, 2020 was the year from hell. So really, in July was the first time that, after we certified that primary, in the middle of July, we were actually able to kind of get a nice little breath of fresh air before we got into the general election, in the fall. But of course, that breath of fresh air was short-lived, because as we saw, the Delta variant was starting to creep up its head around the end of July. And in August, we really started to see that we were having some trouble getting election inspectors for the general election. People were starting to decide maybe, even though they were vaccinated, they weren't going to do it, or they didn't want to do it because of some altercations they had. So a lot of August and September at the Onondaga County Board of Elections was dealing with the election inspector shortage and getting ready for a general election. Even though we had less inspector slots to fill because it was a local year, it was still hard to fill those spots because the Delta variant was coming back, and because we still didn't have a masking mandate in place. And many inspectors, again, were uncomfortable serving at the board without a masking requirement at the polling places, and we couldn't give that masking requirement because well, we didn't have it. I should talk about a huge change that happened that changed everything was Governor Cuomo's resignation at the end of July or middle of July, and the taking of the reins of Governor Hochul. This is a big change, not just for elections, but for New York State. It's a lot of, even though the Board of Elections, the State Board of Elections, the local county boards of elections are independent, in the middle of a pandemic like we're in the middle of a crisis, we rely on the governor's office to set policy regarding some of these health issues. So having a changeover like that in the middle of the year, unexpected changeover, brought a lot of, not turmoil is not the right word, but brought a lot of chaotic energy to the Board of Elections, as we were working to get ready for the general election. In September, we were starting to roll out our general election apparatus. We were really in the swing of things. It was a very heated election for the county legislature, but also for town races and the mayor of Syracuse. And that's why we were very surprised at the beginning of October, with no real notice, that we were starting the redistricting process for the Onondaga County legislature while we were in the middle of an election. This is something that never happened before. And you may ask why that matters to the Board of Elections. Well, both commissioners, Commissioner Sardo and myself, are by law mandated to be on the redistricting commission. So we had to take time away from our election to deal with redistricting, even though we felt like it was being rushed. And we had this was, we've talked about this on this podcast many times, but on October 3rd, the Democrats in the county legislature were informed by the Republican leadership that they would have to have nominations and be ready to start meeting for the redistricting commission by October 8th. So it was not many days notice. I think it was like October 4th that we got notified or something like that. They had to pick out another commissioner to serve with me. And then the next week, we had our first meeting of the redistricting commission, and the chairman, Kevin Holzlander, appointed by the county executive, set out an ambitious 28-day schedule to get redistricting done in Onondaga County. Despite a brand new state law that was being signed by the governor, despite many objections from Democrats and an election going on, this was their plan all along. So the commissioners had to do dual roles. It was a tough month. October may have been one of the tougher months that I've had in my professional life here at the Board of Elections, and I dealt with 2020 before that. But the dual roles of dealing with the redistricting commission and with the election was quite daunting, and especially since the Democratic side was given no professional help. We were not given any consultants. We had to do it all on our own. It was just Sharon Morin and myself doing most of the redistricting work, and doing it in a time where they were holding public hearings while early voting was going on, and before maps were even drawn. It was such a rushed process that, in November we did have our general election. It was one of the lowest turnout elections that I've overseen. In fact, it was the lowest turnout since 2015. Quite a change from the year before, where we had the highest turnout on record. But turnout doesn't really mean less work for boards of elections, because we don't get to decide whether an election is a high turnout or low turnout ahead of time. While we can make educated guesses, we still have to field all of our polling places. We still have to field all of our inspectors. We still have to open up every polling place as if we're going to have high turnout. So we're ready for that if it comes. Early voting, once again, went off without a hitch. We had 6 early voting spots, even though we wanted 10, although that did lead to a legislation that was recently signed that will make us have 10 next year. we, early voting again showed that it actually built on from 2019, the last local year, a higher percentage and a higher number of voters did that. Did early voting this year as opposed to 2019, but nothing like 2020. More people voted by absentee than 2019, and you'll see that when I release my Wonky Wednesday tomorrow, when I'll be talking about absentee voting. But what we saw was just a massive drop-off of activity on Election Day. Drop-offs by Democrats, Republicans, and most importantly, in the non-enrolleds, just did not turn out on November 2nd, and we just did not have the type of turnout that would make major changes in Onondaga County. We also didn't have major changes for either side. It was really kind of a status quo election, this last election. We saw no changes on the Onondaga County legislature. The mayor stayed the same. Democrats picked up a seat on the Syracuse County Council. Now it's all Democrats in the Syracuse County Council. They picked up a supervisor out in Manlius. They picked up town councilors in Lafayette and in Manlius. But they also lost town councilors in Marcellus and Camillus. And they also lost, but they also picked up another town councilor in Geddes, but they lost the village of Solvay. So this is, it was really kind of a even-Steven status quo election in terms of any kind of major changes, and nobody can really claim a mandate from it. Although I will note that almost as many people voted for Democrats on the Onondaga County legislature as Republicans. I think it was less than 1% difference. But the reason they have an 11-6 majority is because of the gerrymandered districts that are drawn from the 2010 maps, and that is one of the reasons why it's so hard to change them now. It's because they're already drawn to keep Republicans in power, despite the number of votes that are coming out there for Democratic candidates. And on November 3rd, the Onondaga County Redistricting Commission, the Reapportionment Commission, again on a party line vote, approved new maps that would do the same for the next 10 years, maybe even worse. However, after some uproar and really being pointed out that the maps that were drawn by Kevin Hulslander and the Republican majority on the Reapportionment Commission were quite flawed and probably illegally so, by cracking the only black majority district inside the city of Syracuse, and also making, I still contend many of the districts they drew out in the county were wrong, but they found out that they were wrong because they were not within the 5% margin, where you can't have the highest number of population and the lowest number of population cannot be more than 5% apart. And it turned out that they, misinterpreted the law, the county law department, and 9 of their 17 districts were not in compliance. So now the county executive had to veto the maps, even though after the November 3rd appointment, the county legislature went into a special session to get those maps approved within 10 days. After that happened, after all of that, then the county executive vetoed the maps. But that led us to December. Instead of taking time and realizing that we needed to bring in some real renowned state experts to help us draw these maps legally, the Republican county legislature decided that they get to draw the maps now. They didn't have to send it to the Reapportionment Commission. The people who drew the maps were the county executive employees, and the maps that were drawn, and the Democrats drew their own maps again. But of course, the Democrats' maps were defeated. A Democrat proposal to take 30 more days to bring in experts to help draw the maps fairly was defeated, and the Republican maps were once again adopted. And that's why we are where we are today on December 28th, a few days from the New Year, in the middle of a holiday season, now continuing to approve the redistricting maps that do not need to be approved until the 2023 election season. So, and that is why tomorrow is the last chance for a hearing with the county executive at 11:30 a.m. And that is kind of my year in recap. I didn't have any notes. I kind of went off the top of my head, some thoughts I had. I'm sure I missed a lot of things. If there's some things that you think I missed, put them in the comment section, and hopefully, we'll all remember this year fondly sometime at some point. Next week I'll do my thoughts ahead to 2022, and we'll be talking about what the elections that are coming up in 2022, and what we can see with election law maybe changing in 2022 as well. I have a kind of a big announcement coming on Sunday. It's a project I've been working on for a little while. I'm not going to tell you what it is right now. You're going to have to tune into my social media on Sunday to see what it is. I think I'll be ready to launch it by then. And I hope it'll be another tool that will help us all stay informed of all the various things that are happening here in Onondaga County. It's been an interesting year, but I want to thank all of you for tuning in, the ones that do, and following along and giving support to all sides of at our office at the Board of Elections over the last year. It's been an interesting, rough year, and with Omicron now raising its head now too, I still ask you and I remind you, please get your shot. I've been advocating to get boosted. I'm actually not boosted yet. I'll be boosted on January 6th. I was eligible, but because a couple of times that I had scheduled appointments to get boosted, redistricting reared its head, and I wanted to get boosted with my wife together. We have an appointment on January 6th to get boosted, so we will be boosted. I did not make that appointment on January 6th on purpose, but it did happen. And so I think that's a good day to remind us, of what we're fighting for, is to go get boosted that day. The date of the insurrection from earlier this year. I did kind of leave that out, but that is something that it was very important that happened this last year. And again, I got a Wonky Wednesday dropping tomorrow. On Friday, I'll have my interviews with the Syracuse redistricting chairs. We'll be talking about their redistricting process that is just starting to ramp up. It's a different process in the county, and I think you'll see a lot of differences there. And finally, starting in the new year, I will be doing commissioner cards back on Mondays at 5 p.m. instead of Tuesdays. There's several different reasons for that, but because I think I'm going to have a little bit more balanced schedule, I'm going to try to do commissioner cards on Mondays, Wonky Wednesdays on Wednesdays, and on Fridays we're releasing my Zoom with Zarnies, try to have that pretty static throughout the new year as we go into a very heavy governor's election, as well as statewide offices, and of course the congressional and state level elections that are going to go on. We also have a couple of county court judges, but you know what? I'm going to save that for next week, because next week we're going to do our 2022 preview about which offices that are up for election and that we will see in the coming year. So thank you very much for joining along this ride as normal. Tune in Sunday to my social media feeds. I got a little bit of an announcement on a project I've been working on. I hope you'll enjoy that. And take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.